So now let's talk about the development and the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. In 1785, a meeting was held at George Washington's home at Mount Vernon for the purpose of discussing commerce. In addition, representatives from states would not show up in many meetings, such as the Annapolis Convention of 1786. So in a way, this delayed the process of making any changes at the Articles of Confederation. And remember, the Articles of Confederation were seen as a weak document. So, of course, there was a lot of things that needed to be discussed and needed to be amended. So the convention itself, the whole purpose of it is to make sure that everybody agrees before its ratification, the U.S. Constitution's ratification. Okay? The known nationalists, such as Alexander Hamilton, such as John Dickinson, and James Madison, attended the convention, but because all states were not represented, they had to reconvene during the following summer in Philadelphia. Now, take a look at this image. This is the convention hall in Philadelphia, and the representatives here who met in Philadelphia in 1787 were the top-notch, educated and accomplished individuals. For the most part, they were merchants, they were lawyers, they were educators, politicians, planters. So in many ways, some of these people you have already know from basic understanding of U.S. history, so some of their names might be familiar to you. Familiar names such as James Madison, such as Alexander Hamilton, such as Gouverneur Maurice, Robert Morris, John Dickinson, and of course, Benjamin Franklin. Now, the actual meeting at the Constitutional Convention was in a way a secret, so that this is not influenced by the press or by the public. George Washington, because of his leadership of the Continental Army, was seen as the able leader. They had confidence in him, so they basically elected him to preside the convention. The delegates shared a basic belief in that the innate selfishness of a man, which must somehow be kept from abusing the power of government. For this purpose, the document that they finally produced contained many checks and balances designed to prevent government or any one branch of government from gaining too much power. James Madison, who has been called the father of the Constitution, devised a plan for a national government. So James Madison created a plan, a real plan, on how to really formulate policies and all the different sub-policies that would ultimately become law, in a national government. The Virginia plan called for an executive branch, and two houses of Congress basically became part of that, and also those are based on population. William Paterson of New Jersey called for a unicameral legislatures with equal representation of the states as well as sharply increased powers for the national government. At that time, James Madison as well as William Paterson ultimately combined all together, called this the New Jersey Plan. Of course, just like any sort of a convention, political tensions would happen. But Benjamin Franklin took over most of these meetings, and he saw the opportunity as a way to unite everyone. Therefore, before any meetings or every meetings, he would start the meeting with a prayer so that they can better negotiate and compromise with decisions they make during those meetings. So in a way, he became the peaceful maker of the team. The convention did lead to a great compromise. The compromise provided a presidency, a Senate with all states represented equally by 2 senators each, and a House of Representatives with representations according to the actual population of the states. The issue of slavery also came about during this whole convention. A compromise here was reached, and slavery was neither endorsed or condemned by the Constitution. Each slave was to count as 3/5 of a person for purposes of representation and direct taxation. Okay, so 3/5 compromise. That 3/5 compromise, nevertheless, okay, was put in the Constitution, okay, but the Constitution avoided the word slavery in any of the document. Okay. The third major area of the compromise was the nature of the presidency. It was natural that George Washington would be the first president, and everyone ultimately wanted him, knows him, again, they have confidence in him, but everyone wanted to make sure that he would not abuse powers, even though that he has been known as one of the really trustable leader. Okay? The public wanted to make sure that there's no abuse of powers of the office of the president so that he will not set a bad example for future presidents. Now, this is what they came up with. The president would serve for a term of 4 years and be re-elected without a term limit. Okay, by that, before term limits happens, anybody could run, okay, for 4 years, term of 4 years, and there was no limit. As a check to democracy, the president was to be elected by an electoral college in which the state would have the same number of electors as it did for senators and representatives combined. The person with the highest total electoral college vote would then become the vice president. If no one gained majority in the electoral college, the president would be chosen by the House of Representatives. Now, the ratification process was a long process. Those who agreed and favored the Constitution named themselves as the Federalists, known as the advocated central power, okay, and labeled their opponents anti-Federalists. The Federalists were very effective in explaining the convention and the document it produced. The Federalist Papers, written as a series of 85 articles, newspaper articles by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, brilliantly expounded the Constitution and demonstrated how the Constitution was designed to prevent the abuse of powers from any directions. Some states agreed right away and approved the constitutions, while others, like Massachusetts, New York, and Virginia, had some issues. In Virginia, George Mason and Patrick Henry opposed the Constitution, but it was George Washington that was able to negotiate and influence them, okay, by promising the whole idea of the Bills of Rights. Even though North Carolina and Rhode Island held out, they ratified within 15 months. It was in 1790 that Rhode Island became the last state to ratify the Constitution. And on March 1789, George Washington would become and was inaugurated as the first president of the United States.